Technology Act.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, and thank you for the opportunity again to give me a chance to speak about some of the laws. The last topic we just spoke was a very controversial topic as well, which was spoken on Monday. So today's topic, which is a law which is used in the subcontinent, especially India. So it's called Sedition Act. And this act was actually enacted in 1870. Now, what the history about this act is that the British Raj took place in subcontinent in 1860, and in 1870 this law was actually placed, and this law was enacted by a British politician and a lawyer, and his name was James Stemson. And the reason why he actually enacted this law, because at that time they were under the threat that the government of the that the British government we will any chance we will have to go, and they were more afraid of the Muslim community than the other communities. And the reason was that the Muslims ruled on subcontinent for a very long time. So the first time this act was actually put into use was in 1891 with a case against the British government at that time, and one common person from the subcontinent. So with this law, what they used to do is that anybody who would say anything about the government, first step that they would take is that they will cut off their ear. That will be the first step to actually stop them from actually saying anything against the government, or to actually turn the different communities, because India at that time, British India was a country which had a lot of communities. So the second step was that if somebody will still carry on talking against the government, they will chop off their head. So this was the law at that time. But with time, slowly passed on, they changed it, so they turned it into a life imprisonment. And this law has been in subcontinent for a long time. The British government, after they actually left the subcontinent and they became India and Pakistan in 1947, when they returned to Britain, they had this law in action, but it wasn't much in use at that time. And with time going on, many of the politicians and many of the lawyers had different conferences, and they said that we should not be using this because this is one black law, like a draconian law, and it's actually violating the freedom of speech. So in 1970s, there was a law commission in UK which had a discussion, and they decided that this York law has not been practiced, although it's there for a very long time. So as time is passing, we should actually abolish it. So it has been in the discussions of the British Parliament, in conferences between the parliamentarians and the lawyers and the politicians. So at the end, in 2009, the British government decided that we need to totally abolish this law, but it was in the system till that time. But in 1998, the International Human Rights Act UK was actually enacted, and when that law was actually enacted, many people actually said that we can't have these two together because it's a contradiction. So we have to let go of the Sedition Act, which was actually let go in 2009. It took a long time actually to actually go away, but unfortunately India is still using it, and it's an outdated law. And under Indian Penal Code, section 124A, they are using this law, and it's mostly against minorities, especially like Kashmiris. And we all know that Kashmiris are not Indian citizens or Pakistani citizens, because it's a disputed state, and till plebiscite doesn't take place, they can't be called Indian or Pakistani. But if they themselves call them Indian or Pakistani, that's entirely up to them. And the reason why it's a disputed state, because they have not been given the right of self-determination, which they are waiting for from the last 76 years. Now this law is strongly used against Kashmiris, which are not Indians, and at the same time Muslims, Sikhs and other journalists, and is used against people who are speaking about Indian government. Now, I would make a request that while we are trying to pass a resolution, this law needs to be actually highlighted, and the parliamentarians, politicians and lawyers in UK need to actually make sure that this outdated law, which is not part of the UK government anymore, which was enacted by the UK government and part of the British Raj, should not be in use in India India or subcontinent anymore, because this law is finished, this law is abolished. So if this country has abolished this law, how can some other countries still use this law? Because it's a law from a colonial era. So this was my first topic that I wanted to talk, and I was thinking it's very important that we make sure that this law is taken away, this law is abolished, because many people are suffering and they are behind prison because of this law. And it's even normal Indians, like even if Indian says anything against the government, they actually use this law, and Indian's own constitution is actually violated. Because Indian Constitution, Article 19, talks about freedom of expression. So how can you talk about freedom of expression when you have this law in a place as well? So this is against their own constitution, and this is making a mockery of like Indian Constitution. And there are many other laws which are going against Indian Constitution, and they're draconian laws, and they should not be in place if India believes in freedom of speech, like freedom of expression. Now the second law which I'm going to be talking about, this is Indian Information Technology Act 2000. So section 69A, under section 69A, anybody who is using social media, anybody who is printing, anybody who is a writer, if they write anything against the Indian government, they can actually imprison them. And if you're out of the country, now it's something very interesting I will let you know. Myself, I have been given a hearing without me there. So under this law, even if you're in India or if you're not in India and you're talking about India, they can actually get your file out, it goes to the Home Minister, and they get passed on to the courts. So what they do is two things. Either they get in touch with you to let you know that under our law you have done a crime, or either they don't even let you know. So in my case, I wasn't told, and how I know? Because I did my research. Now my Twitter account and my other social media accounts, they are barred in India and Indian occupied Kashmir. The reason is because being a Kashmiri Pakistani, I talk about laws and I talk about the violations which are happening there. So my accounts and even my facilities like Twitter account features, they have been limited as well, because they don't want people to hear what I say about them, because I talk about the laws, and I know all Indian constitution laws, I know draconian laws, most of them by heart. So when I talk, I always say that this is a loophole, and this is a mistake, and this is a violation, and this is a contradiction. So it's very important to know that many people who are living in England and the English government, I would like to speak to the parliamentarians in England, English government and the politicians here to actually take this as a note, that how can we be British and we are still being prosecuted, and some are told, as I said earlier, and some are not told. And if I ever go to India, I could be punished up to 7 years, because under this act, up to 7 years imprisonment, and you can be liable for a large fine as well. So this is something I would say that we need to add within our resolution as well, that why are British people, and then the files have been sent to Twitter and other social accounts, and they've been told that they need to block them. So this is violating the freedom of expression of UK as well, Human Rights Act, Article 10, freedom of expression, and Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 10 again, about freedom of expression. So in that way, on social media, on print, and by talking, nobody can stop me, no government can influence my opinion, but my opinion is being influenced by India and the American government, because Twitter is mostly based in America. They are helping them there, and the UK government is not saying a word. They are not taking this matter forward, because they are thinking this is something between the government, because some governments have contracts with social media that they can block certain personalities from different countries not to say a word about their policies or about the laws, about what's happening there. Thank you.